Good afternoon. My name's Jonathan Norman from the Major Projects Knowledge Hub, and I'm talking to Brett Blake from Lean Construction International about the whole idea of lean in construction. On that note, let's start with the basics. You started this morning by asking the group to explain what is lean, so let me throw that question out to you. What is lean?
So I always start with the question, what is lean, to get an understanding of what they believe lean is all about. Lean really is a mindset, a philosophy, a way of working. It isn't just a set of tools and techniques that we want people to work to, and that's sometimes forgotten about. People get focused on delivering a tool as opposed to understand how this fits into the bigger picture of a business and business improvement.
Okay, and in terms of lean, it's about waste, it's about value.
So it's both about waste and value, and we focus on the 5 principles of lean, which are value, value stream, flow, pull and perfection. And we talk about value in the eyes of the customer, and this could be the customer, the end customer that's going to see the benefit from that work that we're doing, or it could be the next part of the process, the customer of the work that I'm doing.
Yeah.
And it's key that we make sure we understand that value so that we can pass on what is expected and not just what we want to do.
Okay.
You spoke about value and waste. Waste is about the things that we do that play no part in delivering that value to the customer. So things that cause frustration, things that we have to do again because we didn't get it right first time, things that cause issues with the flow of work from one stage to another. That's all waste.
Before we come on to construction, I wanted to just get you to talk a little bit about your career, because you've worked across a number of industries.
Yes.
Do you want to describe how you first came across lean and how you've seen it applied in some of the industries you've worked in?
So that's a really interesting question. So if you'd have asked me that when I was 16, what lean was, I would have turned around and said, I'm not sure. Never heard of it. It must be something about losing weight. However, ask me that 15 years into my career, for me to look back when I was 16, I could tell you everything that we were doing, which was working in a lean environment, even though I didn't understand that's what it was. So I started my career as a toolmaker, a mechanical engineer, and we had to work to standards. We had to collaborate with people from different departments. We had to understand what the customer required and how we met that value in the most effective and efficient way. At that time, I didn't see that as being lean. I saw that as just being the right thing to do in business. It was only 15 years later in my career when I moved into automotive, and we were working with an organisation called Toyota. And Toyota have something called the Toyota Production System, and they've been seen to be the architects of lean ways of thinking and lean culture. And we adopted that within automotive, and it was only then that I could then pull back on my experiences from when I started in plastic injection moulding and as a toolmaker and mechanical engineer, that actually lean is ingrained into everything that I do.
Excellent. I mean, it's in some ways, lean and the idea that it's a Japanese manufacturing technique is a bit off-putting, because it's actually basic common sense.
It is. So what's happened over many years of lean and based on the Toyota Production System is consultants have made it rather too complicated. They've come up with new techniques to sell into the market. And where we're different within lean construction is we try to bring lean thinking back to its basic principle, which is what is value, what is waste, and how do we remove waste from the value that we give to our customers and clients. We use simple techniques and tools based around removal of waste. We use something called the 8 wastes, which focuses on transport, inventory, motion, waiting, overproduction, overprocessing and defects, and all of these elements focus on waste. The 8th waste is skills. How do we utilise and engage with people within the process to get the most out of them? Most people come to work with a skill around how to deliver their process excellence. What we do within lean and continuous improvements is get them to look at their processes in a different way, focusing on waste and how do we remove that from what we do in day-to-day life.
That's interesting, because on a construction site you'll typically have different contractors coming onto site at different times, you'll have different trades coming up.
That's correct.
And those often define the stages in the project,
Yes.
which may not be the most efficient way
Agreed.
of actually building the construction.
So everybody, whether it be construction, automotive or aerospace, or even in service, delivering a service to a client or customer, they'll all think that the way they do that's been identified by standard is the best way of working. It's actually one way of working. And what we challenge within continuous improvements is to look at that standard and to see, does it really give value how we first perceived it to give value? And it's okay to actually change a standard as long as everybody's on board with that standard. Within construction, you mentioned collaboration. It's key that our different trades collaborate with each other and understand from each other how they deliver excellence together. So how do our electricians work with our dry liners? So one trade knows exactly what they're there to deliver, but how it will impact on another trade. And some of the losses and waste we have in construction is these trades only focusing directly on their element and not understanding how it may affect others within that delivery of a project.
That's very apposite, because in the room today we've got a project manager, we've
Yes.
got a quantity surveyor, we've got an electrical engineer, a maintenance engineer, and probably got other roles as well. And they've just been doing an exercise, a simulation.
That's correct.
Do you want to just talk me through what is it that they're doing and what's the purpose of the simulation?
So the idea of the simulation is to get all of these different functions working together to understand what they can do to affect change and improvement in what they do at work. The simulation pulls on all of those functions. So you mentioned earlier on that we have multiple functions today in the training. And I'm always asked, should I just send one of my teams, say my financial team, on their own? Or should I send a cross-functional team? And I'll always say, look at the cross-functional team, because understand how they work together and how they impact each other, whether it be through commercials and how we set up the project right at the very start, leading into then working with our supply chain to make sure we're delivering the right componentry on time to the sites that will be using it for the construction. If they're not working with that cross-functionality, they don't understand the impact they have on each other. So for the simulation, it's drawing out how they work together. It's drawing out some of the communications they have to have. So it's communication running at the same pace as the physical project and the material flow. It's drawing out what challenges each department face and also the challenges they set on to the next department if they're not sure what the end product should look like or what the entire project should look like at the end.
That's interesting, because in that first run of the simulation, a number of things struck me. It was incredibly quiet. So they started to talk together a bit more towards the end, but they were very quiet to start off with. And partly because this was the way you'd set them up, but they stuck to their stations and they didn't really look at what the next in line was doing or what the people before them were doing.
So within the simulation, we'd set a rule that the supervisor needed to be the contact point. Now typically the supervisor or leader will be the contact point between the project managers and maybe the client, and that in that case you're reducing the amount of engagement and collaboration within the other teams. So we set that up as a current state because that's typically what happens when things go wrong. One person will take control and direct everybody else. What we need in situations for continuous improvement to thrive is that leader to allow people to collaborate so we get the best experience and knowledge from everybody in the room.
One of the things that I've learned about Lean today is this idea it's as much about what you shouldn't be doing as what you should be doing.
Agreed.
Do you want to expand on that a bit?
So yes, traditionally people would look at Lean and looking at Lean improvements around what do we do well, what's our process look like, and how can we use the next innovation, the next magic wand, so to speak, to improve what we're doing, as opposed to looking at the things that stop us doing what we need to do. That's what we would typically call our waste. So it's about how do we remove the things we shouldn't do, because if we remove 10% of waste, that is a far greater improvement than improving our processes by 10%. We call it short interval control. Short interval control is that interval at which point in time you assess where you currently are. Now in automotive and aerospace, that short interval control can be as small as seconds or minutes. Within construction, our short interval control is typically days or weeks. When it's days or weeks, it's then harder to identify where the issues are. So our challenge within construction is to get that interval that we assess where we are at a lower increment, so we can then take action in a live situation.
Yeah, whilst it's still meaningful.
While it's still meaningful, and the people that we're actually affecting the issues that we see are there to work through to solve the problem together.
Right, interesting. Because you're really expressing waste not just in terms of physical waste,
Sure.
but also in terms of time and indeed effort.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And with the simulation that we're doing today, the next step that the guys are going to be working on is identifying the wastes that they see in the process. They're going to look at that even before we start to challenge how effective the process steps were. So we will look at the wastes, and then behind me you'll see a blank piece of paper. That's where we're going to be creating our value stream map. And the value stream map will identify the process steps in order, and we'll be able to identify what those process steps are made up of. And this may be the first time that our team will have seen the end-to-end of that process and really understand the impact that they had on their station has on the finished product. Once we have that, then we'll capture their frustrations, their wastes on the value stream map, but also opportunities that they see that they can improve on their current situation. And it's those that we focus on to make improvement in the first instance around lean.
Okay. I mean, I talked about this as being common sense. So you'd think it was adopted widely throughout construction, but clearly there are some organisations that are better than others. What are the particular challenges and obstacles within construction to adopting lean?
So the typical challenges, not just in construction but any environment, is around how we look at what we do here today aligned to the strategic direction of the business. So we've got a good cross-functional group of people here today that understand the current situation. They see this in their day-to-day lives. But how do they lift that up so that the business starts to hear that voice? So that the business starts to understand where these issues are and how the business can support these people through that change and that improvement. The experience in this room will make those changes. What they need is support and direction from the organisation to say, this is the way we move together in one direction. Because if we do it in separate and dispersed directions, that change will not have an overall impact or effect on the business.
Right. So it's about listening to the people at the sharp end, listening to the people actually doing the work and understanding as a result.
Typically an organisation would see a pyramid. And at the bottom of the pyramid are the people doing the tasks, whether it be electricians, carpenters, project managers, delivering an actual activity. At the top of the pyramid is usually the leadership team. And what we say within lean construction is that pyramid should be reversed. So that actually the people that are typically at the very top of the chain are there to support everybody else doing the do. Support them with the right direction, support them with the time and the techniques available, like lean, within lean construction, to actually go out and deliver improvement based on company direction, but also the issues that the guys are facing day by day.
I found it fascinating not only to see the mix of skills and trades here in the room, but also the mix of organisations. So you've got main contractor, you've got manufacturers, you've got people at every stage in the supply chain.
Agreed. And that's really key. If we just work with the main contractors and making change, but they don't take their supply chain with them, they will only ever be as good as the supply chain. If the supply chain have all of the changes embedded and it's working well for them, but the key contractors aren't doing this, the subcontractors will become frustrated and then just fall back on how they used to do things and align back to that key contractor. So it really is key and pivotal for lean construction to succeed that the main contractors and supply chain work collaboratively together to make this lean thinking work within their industry.
Very good. Well, thanks ever so much, Brett. I'm sorry that I'm not going to be around tomorrow when you rerun the simulation, because I think it'd be fascinating to see how they approach it once you've talked to them and once they've explored some of the concepts of lean.